Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring today's most pressing issues across the globe. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. In the week that saw the conflict pass its 1,000th day, the war in Ukraine has intensified as both the U.S. and Russia escalate their military strategies. Western powers substantially boosted Ukraine's military arsenal by giving the green light to use U.S.-supplied ATACMS and UK Storm Shadow missiles against Russia. The Kremlin responded by changing its nuclear doctrine, lowering the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons and deploying a new type of missile, Oreshnik, to strike the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. Meanwhile, South Korea is considering whether to provide military aid to Ukraine, including ammunition and lethal weapons, which Russia warns would completely destroy bilateral relations. For a deeper discussion on this, we invite Dr. Alex Bristow, Senior Analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Welcome, Dr. Bristow.
Hello.
We are also joined by Dr. Chi-Hoon Yoo, Associate Research Fellow and Director of International Cooperation at the Korea Institute for Defense Analysis. Great to have you, Dr. Yoo.
Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you. So let's start right away with Dr. Yoo. After Ukraine launched long-range missiles like the U.S. ATACMS and the UK Storm Shadow, Russia responded with a new type of ballistic missile. Can you tell us Can you tell us more about the capabilities of the new IRBM that President Putin revealed, and what's the significance of this deployment?
Well, Russia's recent unveiling of its new intermediate-range ballistic missiles, reportedly named Oreshnik, represent a significant escalation in its military strategies, especially in response to Ukraine's use of advanced long-range missiles like the U.S. ATACMS and the UK Storm Shadow. The Oreshnik is a technological leap, achieving hypersonic speed beyond Mach 11 and boasting an operational range of up to 5,000 kilometers, which can place much of Europe and even parts of the United States within its reach. This missile's ability to carry multiple warheads, both conventional and nuclear, combined with its capacity to deploy cluster submunitions, amplifies its destructive potential and makes interception highly challenging. The deployment of Oreshnik has far-reaching implications for the Russian-Ukraine war and the regional stability. It is widely viewed as a direct warning to the NATO and Western nations, signaling Russia's willingness to escalate militarily in response to continued Western support for Ukraine. Its nuclear capability further intensifies fears of catastrophic escalations as the war risks spiraling into a broader international crisis. By introducing such an advanced weapon, Russia aims to bolster its strategic deterrence while deterring NATO's involvement. The missile's introduction has sparked urgent calls for international dialogue to prevent the war from reaching a dangerous and unpredictable tipping point. I think that this development underscores the critical need for de-escalation to avoid a potential global repercussions.
Right. Now, speaking of Western involvement, amid this, Dr. Bristow, Putin has warned that Western countries supporting Ukraine could also become targets. France, UK, and the US granted Ukraine permission to use their long-range missiles or strikes on Russian territory. This has raised concerns about the war escalating into an international conflict. What are the chances?
I think the war already is an international conflict, and the escalation is all on Russia's side. I think the West has responded and could arguably responded too slowly. I think it should have provided this permission to use these deep strike weapons inside Russia, should have provided this a long time ago. It's an international conflict because we've seen North Korean troops, maybe as many as 11,000 deployed to places like Kursk. We now have reports that Russia is hiring mercenaries from places like Yemen, which presumably would have been brokered with assistance from countries like Iran. It's obviously taking arms from a range of countries itself. This is an international conflict already, and it's Russia that is ramping up pressure. Russia's been making nuclear threats and waving new weapons around for some time now. I think it has had an effect on the West's willingness to support Ukraine, but I'm heartened by the fact that the West has punished Russia for taking these North Korean troops by finally giving permission to use these deep strike weapons. I just wish that they had the courage to do this some time ago.
Right, so it became more concerning, the situation has. Now, there have been reports of North Korean troops playing an advisory role in Mariupol, and that 500 of them have been killed due to the Storm Shadow missile attack. Dr. Yu, how likely is it that North Korean forces could become more actively involved in the war?
Well, I think the likelihood of North Korean forces becoming more actively involved in the war in Ukraine depends on their strategic interest, perceived benefits, and the broader geopolitical context. North Korea might view limited involvement as a way to align with Russia and indirectly challenge the Western influence without engaging in direct confrontations with NATO or the United States. Supporting Russia could deepen ties between Pyongyang and Moscow, potentially yielding economic or military benefits, such as the access to advanced technology or covert trade opportunities. However, there are significant risks associated with the deeper involvement. The reported deaths of 500 North Korean personnel in Mariupol highlight the potential for heavy losses, which could deter engagement, especially if such involvement provokes a domestic or international backlash. Additionally, increased participation could lead to harsher sanctions or punitive measures from the global communities, further isolating North Korea. For Russia, while external support is beneficial, relying heavily on North Korean forces could pose challenges related to operational integrations and political optics. North Korea's involvement appears to be more symbolic than tactical, focusing on advisory roles or logistical support rather than direct combat. Expanding their role could attract unwanted attention and escalate the tensions. I think China's influence also plays a role, as Beijing may discourage Pyongyang from deeper involvement to avoid destabilizing the region or complicating China's strategic goals. Moreover, North Korea must balance any foreign engagement with its domestic priorities, including military development and internal stability. Given these factors, it is likely that North Korea will maintain its current level of involvement, focusing on advisory roles and symbolic gestures rather than direct combat. If Russia offers significant incentives such as economic aid or advanced weapon technology, North Korea might consider expanding its role. However, the risk of the casualties and international repercussions and potential backlash make substantial escalations unlikely at this time.
Right, so let's hope for the support not to be expanded in a bigger scale. Now, speaking of the ongoing war, Dr. Bristow, what do you see as the biggest sources of uncertainty in the Ukraine-Russia conflict? Could it be factors like North Korean involvement, will the incoming Trump administration, or Russia's changes to its nuclear strategy?
I think all of those things that you mentioned are sources of uncertainty. But I think the biggest source of uncertainty are the lessons that dictators, authoritarian regimes around the world are taking from the signals that the West is sending, the level of support we're giving to Ukraine. If the West stops supporting Ukraine or winds back support, if the liberal democracies of the world show that they don't have the staying power for a long war like this, then I think countries around the world like China, Iran, North Korea will take lessons from that. And I think that's the biggest risk, that's the biggest source of uncertainty, is that failure of deterrence that we would be signaling if we cannot support a country that's been so flagrantly attacked like Ukraine. Then I think it sends a signal that we won't necessarily support other countries around the world. So it could encourage aggression. I think specifically North Korea's actions have raised the stakes in this region. I'm obviously talking from Australia, so we call this the Indo-Pacific region. And I think it's shown again that the security of Europe and the Indo-Pacific is very much linked. You did mention Donald Trump. I think it's important that we all talk to Donald Trump as soon as we can. We lobby him and the team around him to say that there would be huge costs to America, its reputation and its power, if it coerces Ukraine into what it would call a peace deal, but what would actually be a very temporary arrangement before Russia consolidated and tried its luck again with further aggression.
What about Dr. Yu? What types of K defense systems in Ukraine is Ukraine likely to prioritize in its requests for South Korean military support?
Well, Ukraine is expected to prioritize South Korea's advanced and adaptable K defense systems to address escalating missile and aerial threat from Russia. Korea medium-range surface-to-air missile systems named Cheongung is likely to be a key focus of Ukraine's request due to its modern capabilities, including the interceptions of aircraft, drones, and missiles at altitude of up to 15 kilometers. This medium-range system is vital for defending critical infrastructure and urban areas against ongoing Russian attacks. The Cheongung versatility and advanced technology align with Ukraine's goal of, establishing a comprehensive and integrated air defense network, offering both immediate tactical value and long-term upgrade to its defense capabilities. In addition, Ukraine may seek South Korea's older Hawk surface-to-air missile systems to supplement its layered defense approach. While less advanced, these systems are cost-effective and can be quickly deployed to address gaps in air defense or provide support alongside more modern systems like Patriot and NASAMS. For frontline operations, Ukraine is likely to prioritize the man-portable air defense systems like Chiron, named Shingung, which are highly effective against low-altitude threats like drones and helicopters. These portable systems are particularly valuable in dynamic battlefield conditions, offering mobility and versatility. Overall, Ukraine's strategy will likely emphasize the systems that South Korea can deliver promptly and in large numbers, with a focus on compatibility with NATO standards to ensure seamless integrations and enhanced operational effectiveness.
Right. We spoke about this with Dr. Bristow just now, but after North Korea's involvement to the war, the South Korean government indicated it might consider providing lethal aid. And with shifts in the diplomatic and security landscape, and with Russia warning that this move will destroy ties completely, there's speculation that South Korea's weapons support policy could be adjusted. What's your take on this, Dr. Yu?
Where South Korea's potential shift toward providing lethal aid to Ukraine reflects the evolving geopolitical dynamics and growing pressure on Seoul to align more actively with Western allies in countering Russian aggressions. North Korea's reported advisory role in the war, coupled with increasing intensity of the war, has heightened South Korea's sense of strategic responsibility, particularly given its own security concerns on the Korean Peninsula. The South Korean government has thus far provided non-lethal aid and maintained a cautious stance, wary of provoking Russia and affecting its diplomatic ties. However, as North Korea's involvement grows more direct, South Korea may find its restraints increasingly untenable, especially if it sees the parallels between the Russia-Ukraine war and potential future threat from its northern neighbors. The re-election of Donald Trump could further influence South Korea's policies. Trump's previous stance on NATO and U.S. military commitment have raised concerns among allies about the reliability of American defense guarantees. If similar policies reemerge, South Korea may feel compelled to adopt a more proactive and independent approach to its foreign policies, including a more robust role in global security. Adjusting its weapons support policy could also serve to solidify South Korea's alignment with NATO and other Western allies, ensuring that its contributions are recognized in shaping a collective security framework. While such a policy shift carries risks, including potential retaliation from Russia, it would also position South Korea as a key player in international security efforts, underscoring its readiness to act decisively in the face of escalating global conflict.
And the war in Ukraine has already started to reshape the security landscape in Europe. Dr. Bristow, in this context, how important is cooperation between Europe and the Asia-Pacific region, particularly South Korea, for strengthening regional security?
I think it's vital. I think we have to look at what the authoritarian countries are doing themselves. Russia and China are clearly cooperating at a level we didn't expect them to do. It looks like they've worked together to cut a cable in the Baltic Sea recently, for instance. Obviously, North Korean troops are now fighting with Russia. Iran is helping in a number of ways, including providing ballistic missiles to Russia. So I think those four countries are working more closely together than we thought they would. And so we have to pull together as well. The allies of the Indo-Pacific region, South Korea, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, these sorts of countries have to work with Europe. And of course, the US has interests in both areas. And there is some evidence of this already happening. It's worth noting that European countries, despite all the pressure on European security at the moment, are showing their investment in this region by sending precious military assets to visit the region. So we had an Italian aircraft carrier here recently that visited Australia and went further into the Pacific. I believe the French will send an aircraft carrier soon, the British as well, I think next year. These are very precious assets that they can't really spare at the moment, but they are clearly showing that they have a very strong interest in the security of this region. Of course, we are helping Ukraine in a number of ways, but I think it's clear that we need to do more than we presently are. And look, I think that one of the things we could do is revise some of the structures that we have for coordination to pull the two sides together a bit more closely, to pull the Pacific and the European countries together more closely. So, for example, the G7, I think, is a format where we should look to expand that now. I think particularly if South Korea takes the courageous step of directly supplying arms to Ukraine, I think one of the benefits of that for South Korea should be that it gets a permanent place in the G7. It should be more like the G7 plus that includes South Korea, Australia, and India on a permanent basis. And we should build that into a more robust format for cooperation. I think it is time that South Korea was in that format.
Mm-hmm. Now, Dr. Yu, we hear that you recently participated in a diplomatic mission to Eastern European countries focusing on strengthening defense and defense industry cooperation and engaging with NATO and EU security policies. What were the key outcomes?
Well, over the past week, I had the privilege of visiting NATO headquarters, the European External Action Service, the Hungarian Ministry of the Defense, and the Romanian Ministry of Defense and Ministry of the Foreign Affairs, accompanied by Dr. Kim Jong-soo, the president of the Korean Institute for Defense Analysis, KAIDA. During this mission, we held in-depth discussions with the senior officers on pressing issues such as the current global security landscape, the growing military alignment between Russia and North Korea, and the increasing importance of strengthening security and defense industry cooperations between South Korea and Europe. Recognizing KAIDA's position as South Korea's leading national defense policy research institute, we also explored opportunities for collaborations with prominent European policy think tanks to foster joint research and build stronger intellectual and strategic partnerships. Key outcomes of this diplomatic mission included, a reaffirmed commitment to deepening defense ties, with a particular focus on tackling shared challenges like hybrid threat, cyber attack, and regional instabilities. NATO and EU leaders acknowledged South Korea's expanding role as a key security partner, while our engagement with Hungary and Romania identified new opportunities for defense technology sharing, joint research and development, and military modernization efforts. In addition, our discussions with European research institutions laid the groundwork for future joint researches and academic exchanges to enhance the collaborations on global defense and security policies. I think this mission not only strengthens South Korea's role in international security, but also established a solid foundation for practical partnerships to advance mutual defense capabilities, policy innovations, and regional stability.
Right. We'll look forward to more of those efforts from you in the near future as well. I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up our discussion here. Many thanks again to Dr. Yu and Dr. Bristow for sharing your insights tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.